Hello, and welcome back to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is Tuesday, and this is our map session, where we dive a little more deeply into our topic for the week. And so, without further ado, I will turn it over to Victoria.
Hello, friends, onlookers, Lilligans, anti-novelists, and everyone else. So grateful to have you here with us. You may remember from yesterday, I am broadcasting live from the tundra, trundling north through Minnesota now. We are almost to the first stopping point on our way to canoe in the Boundary Waters. So not missing a beat, I want to dive right in and talk to you about scenes and sequels. No matter what kind of story you're writing, whether you're writing romance, thriller, adventure, travelogue, whatever, scenes and sequels are a critical piece of, number one, engaging your reader and making sure that they have a great time during your story. And number two, moving your story along in a recognizable fashion. I think we've all read books that seem to kind of spin their wheels, the muddle in the middle, and you don't really know what's going on. Scenes and sequels will help you solve the muddle in the middle, and they will also give you a trail to follow all the way through the story. So let's talk about what that looks like from the worm's eye view. A scene is simply a piece of your story that represents some kind of forward-moving action. Now, that doesn't mean that there have to be bombs blowing up and car chases and bad guys jumping out windows and good guys rolling over cars. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about any action that represents the movement of your character through the narrative. So, for example, a scene could be in the opening chapters, something that maybe introduces a character, or it introduces a particular conflict, or maybe it brings to light a piece of information. In those cases, then, your main character, your point of view character, and we're speaking generally, your point of view character is going to have to react to whatever this is. They're going to have to either think about it in such a way that your reader is seeing their thoughts and wandering along with them, or maybe they're going to have a conversation with someone. That's the sequel to the scene that poses the question. So what are some things that you can do with your scenes in order to set up a good scene so that the sequel becomes obvious? Because all of these tips and tricks are about helping you, the writer, identify your process and get those words on the page. It's great to have them all in your head and think in beautiful, panoramic, cinematic, what this movie of your story looks like in your head. But until you hammer it out on the page and start to polish it and turn it into something that a reader is going to enjoy, it's just a movie in your head, and that doesn't count. So how do we get our scenes on the page? I've already mentioned, what if that main character discovers something? So if you're writing a mystery, if you're writing something that has some elements of discovery, making a discovery is a great way to pique that interest in your reader, because your scenes are love letters to your readers. I like to think of them and refer to them as the offering, especially in the opening chapters of your story. Your scenes are what you're offering to your readers, saying, come into this story because it's going to be terrific, so come with me. So that character could discover something. And then for the sequel, they're going to have to react to it. You could reveal something. A revelation is another great way to pique your reader's interest. So they've read this piece of information, this revelation, be upset by it. Are they going to go to their best friend and try to work it out? Are they going to be completely freaked out and avoid it head in the sand altogether? Just by making a decision about what's going to be in this scene, you're already setting yourself up to write the sequel. And that's the next step in keeping the story writing going. What if you ask a key question? Sometimes, think of it as Sherlock Holmes. Well, what if X happens and then we're going to have to consider Y? That's how you set up the scene. Your character's asking a key question that then makes your reader ask that question and start to think about those possibilities. And that's what makes them want to keep reading, because they want to know, how is this character going to handle this? They could take a specific action. This is kind of an easy one. They're going to do something that's going to force them to then have to have a reaction. Are they going to open the door or not open the door? Are they going to make the phone call or not make the phone call? Each of those actions requires a reaction or a sequel to show the reader what happens next, what comes after that action. On a scene and sequel level, those are some questions that you can ask. Now let's abstract that out to the next higher level. What about on a chapter to chapter level? Well, Kathleen's going to talk to you about the next group of character traits, and those are going to involve things like loyalty and dependability. Well, as you're moving through your scenes and sequels to build chapters, you're going to be asking yourself, okay, what if in this scene I reveal that my main character is telling a lie about this particular bit of information, thereby demonstrating that maybe this character is not trustworthy? Or let's flip that to a larger level. What if your narrator makes a comment about, she could have been thinking this, but then again, maybe she considered that? Your narrator then becomes untrustworthy, which that's a great way to hook a reader, because then the reader wants to find out, is the narrator telling the truth? Are the characters giving us the real information? You're building all kinds of little hills and valleys that so between chapter and chapter, then you want to start considering the story that begins to then that launch your story, power through to the midpoint, which is the exact middle of your story, and then end with your final battle, your final confrontation, and then the rebirth that shows your character in the new world that's become a result of the journey of the story. So as you're thinking about those plot points, those are naturally occurring scenes and sequels and actions and reactions, because if they do something at the midpoint that is grabbing the sword or taking hold of the situation, well, that's going to have a reaction. Maybe the villain's going to come after them, or maybe they're going to find that mentor or that person that helps them push through to the final battle. Every one of those choices, when you're looking at your plot points, is going to inform the thing that comes next. That's what gets your story out of your head onto the page. Write down those scenes, even if it's just a list, and start to game out. Okay, if this is what they're doing, if this is the action, what's the natural reaction to that? It could go this way, or it could go that way. Those are the choices for you to make as the writer. My final note is on the 4 acts, or if you choose to write in 3 acts, whatever structure you choose, you want those acts to relate to each other in the same way. So Act 1 poses the opening material, the beginning of your story, those first scenes. Then there's a bridge into Act 2. Something at the end of Act 1 requires a sequel, which is get to the end of Act 2, and that's your midpoint. That's where things change and your story starts to ramp up. That's Act 3, is escalating action, rising action, fun and games, getting into the thick of it. All of those things then have their own natural sequels, and that's what brings you to the finale of Act 4, which is where you tie it all up with a bow, and that's how you end your story. So as you're listening to Kathleen review the character traits, I want you to start thinking about, okay, if I show loyalty in this first chapter, then what if I turn that on its head with something that shows disloyalty in chapter 2 or chapter 3? How can I string that together? And you're going to start to see, number one, deeper into your characters, which makes them much more readable and enjoyable. And number 2, you're going to see deeper into your story, because you're going to understand, if this happens here, then the 2 natural consequences. Which one do I pick? I'm going to pick this one. So then that means there's another consequence, and you're going to start to build scenes and sequels into chapters, and that's going to propel you through. So I hope this was helpful. Take it all in and start thinking in natural actions with their reactions, and start applying that to the pieces of your story so that you can string it together into a narrative. Good luck. Get those words on the page, because they won't stay in your head forever. We are almost through most of our trip, so I'm going to sign off and hand this over to Kathleen to take us away into the character traits.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That was really fascinating. I love the fact that you can go all the way down to the worm level and then go up to the level of the scene that gets you through the chapter and the chapters that get you through the book. And it's really basically the same structure going on all the way through. Well, time and again in your presentation, Victoria, and you folks probably noticed that, didn't you? That Victoria was consistently saying, well, it could go this way or it could go that way. Well, what makes that choice? What makes that choice is human motivation. And that's what I find endlessly fascinating. So we're going to take a look at human motivation, where it has to do with the dependability subgroup of the empathy character traits. Empathy character traits are all about how our character relates to other people. In a dream world, all of our characters would care very deeply for all the others in the world and would even have a sense of the importance of people that aren't even in their lives, because we would just ideally behave in this way. Well, we don't live in an ideal world, and we frequently encounter characters, especially in stories, who are anything but empathetic towards others, who are anything but dependable. So let's take a look at the 4 character traits that are in the dependability subgroup and how they could motivate decisions in your scenes and sequels. Well, the first one of these is responsibility. Does your character show up on time if he says he's going to be somewhere? Does your character do the piece of the job that everyone's depending on him to do? Does your character follow through on promises and commitments? Or is he scatterbrained? Now, you could have 2 different kinds of undependability. You could have the character who's got a heart of gold, but he's just a nitwit. And if he doesn't write it down, he doesn't remember. And so you can't necessarily assume that you've got a villain just because you have a character who's undependable, but it sure is possible. And if you have that kind of a situation going on, then the decisions that that character are going to make are going to be different, because the character that cares about dependability is going to make choices to follow through and do the dependable thing. Whereas 2 other characters, the villain and the nitwit, may not do that at all. The nitwit won't even think about it. Oh, did I say I would do that? Oh, I forgot. Or the villain who said, oh, don't worry, you give me your money, I am going to invest it for you, and I'm going to make 5 times return from your money, I promise. So you have, in the one case, it's a deliberate untrustworthiness and undependabilityness. And in the other case, it is just an insufficiency of attention. All right, so let's take a look at another one of those character traits, and that has to do with sincerity. Our sincerity is all about listening attentively and speaking from the heart. So if we have a character that's perfectly sincere, that character will always portray their heart in conversations with others. This could be problematic if the character doesn't also have a sense of moderation and a sense of where should you draw the line between what you reveal and what you don't reveal. He could be revealing things that are dangerous to the villain, utterly perfectly sincere and getting himself into trouble. So we have to bear that in mind. Or also we could have the villain who is insincere because he doesn't intend to convey the truth. It's part of the plan to turn you or your character, your hero, into the patsy by not being straightforward and honest. But there's another type as well, and that's the distracted. Again, you could call them a nitwit if you want. It's the person, maybe it's not even their fault. Maybe they have ACDC and things catch their attention and they can't focus and can't give their complete attention. Not everyone has that capability, but that's going to affect the outcome of your story. What if you have a character who, sincere as he may be, cannot give that attention? If you have that character, then you're going to be in a situation where if your hero is depending on that person to have caught what your hero is saying, that's not going to take place. So then again, your action and the decisions, what could happen and what might not happen. The third one is loyalty. And loyalty has an awful lot to do with caring for others. It's that golden rule. Do unto others as you would do want them to do to you. That's a huge part of loyalty, because we want others to treat us properly. If we arrive first, we should be seated first. Doesn't always happen, but we have this sense of justice involved here, that if something as simple as not honoring a turn, then it alerts people. Why? What's going on? And that can be a deciding point, something that someone's going to have to react to. Why? Why is this teacher always treating that student so preferentially? What's going on? What about our poor hero who's getting left in the shuffle, who's being overlooked and ignored? That's part of loyalty as well, because the teachers should be loyal to all of their students. So loyalty is very much dependent also on the closeness, because in the extreme, when loyalty should be very, very strong, such as siblings and parents, and if it's not there, then it's a very grave thing indeed. But disloyalty of every kind is of the same nature, just of different degrees. And finally, there's trustworthiness. And trustworthiness is kind of made up of the other three, because trustworthiness is about whether our character built a track record. If our character has a track record of being dependable and reliable and sincere and loyal, then that is going to be a character that we can trust. And also, as we said in the introduction in the compass, if you have a villain, then they're not going to be trustworthy. And you can signal to your reader that this character is not to be trusted by showing that they're untrustworthy early on. Again, now, will your hero have noticed this? What might have prevented your hero from noticing? And how will he come to find out? Will he find out in time or too late? So you see, all of this business of scenes and sequels is also very closely related to the character traits. So let's turn it back over to Victoria to sum things up for us.
Oh, that was amazing. Yes, I love that. I love how the traits act as levers. If you think of them as, if I toggle loyalty here, then how is it going to affect responsibility over here? You really can dive deep into what your characters are doing and why they're doing it in your story. And then in terms of scene and sequel, use those critical details in order to start building those scenes. Your characters are going to be way more authentic, and your story is going to be way more engaging and keep those readers turning pages. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, join us over at LiLLiPub.org. We welcome you into the community where you will find wonderful mentors and friends, avid readers, other writers who are inside of us, and all of that aspect of community, which is why we're here. So thank you so much for your time. That is your most resource, and we do appreciate it. And we will see you in the next videos.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.